amazing first album. I should note that I picked up Led Zeppelin at Logan Airport for their first tour in Ray's Volkswagen camper bus. In 1967 to 1970 was the big bang for music, live and recorded, when music exploded in popularity to become an essential part of people's lifestyle. When Ray opened BCN a year later, after the Tea Party in 1968, it helped cement Boston as a private, pivotal launching ground for emerging acts. We were all making it up as it went along. Nationally, FM began to override AM radio and complemented by a national circuit of ballrooms and helped to launch some of the most talented acts we've ever seen who are still popular more than 50 years later. It took enormous courage for the guy from Kansas to take these incredible risks. Since the Tea Party was not well liked by the town fathers, I felt I could not afford to get busted. So I was very careful to make sure that I not give the city councilmen like Dapper a chance. I saw myself as being like living in a bit of a fishbowl. So into the environment in 1968, Ray asked if I can find a room for a jock that he's bringing in from California. Of course. I have to admit that Steve Segal and I were the odd couple. For all the caution I showed, Steve was the funny, charming other extreme. I had the good fortune to have a long career in music, and nothing compares to the frightening and exhilarating time of those few years at the end of the 60s. There was no history for it, and many times it was simply nuts. And one of my favorite, actually my very favorite show of all time, was WKRP in Cincinnati. And I always loved the character, Johnny Fever, who took a mug and he could turn it and he was a different person every time. And that was Steve's extraordinary talent, that he could be whatever he chose to be, a true genius as being a chameleon. Watching Ray from the very first moment on the top floor of Newbury Street when Joe put the needle down on the mother's invention, it was truly an experiment in radio. Ray was taking college disc jockeys and turning them into pros. What Steven did was help lead the way. In my mind, he was simply brilliant, becoming a model for how great free-form radio could be done. He was the avatar at BCN. It is. And to boot, he was a wonderful, sweet, charming human being who will be sorely missed. And please welcome his son, Alex.
Lower the microphone, Alex.
Yeah, that's me. And I'll try to follow that.
You can just hold on to it. Just hold on to it.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Hi, Alex.
My name is Alex Segal. I am the son of the obscene Stephen Clean. Thank you. First, thank you everybody for being here. I know some people flew. Some people are lucky enough to be here, and everybody paid a lot of money to stay in hotels because we, as Segals, plan very well around the Boston Marathon and the Red Sox game. So thank you. In his name. I just wanted to give you guys a quick background about what it's like being the son of Stephen Clean, who I still don't know how he got his Clean nickname. And if anyone knows, I'd be interested in learning. I grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, a middle class suburb, and I learned very early on that my dad was not like other dads. Other dads were Fortune 500 execs or lawyers or doctors, and my dad was the polar opposite. And I think he enjoyed that.
Yes, just a little bit.
A little bit, maybe. But I think that I learned to appreciate it. Between 4th and 6th grade is when I realized that he.
You okay, bud?
Come on. Got some salad.
Okay.
You got the salad.
He was the cool dad.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So when I had to be picked up from school, and I'm sorry guys, I'm struggling here.
You're okay, bud.
I had to be picked up from school. My mom, it was easy for her and it was easy for me because she was the business executive. She worked at, she was a CFO at a community foundation. So when she came to pick me up, it was easy breezy. When my dad came to pick me up, he was either dressed in white polo, purple polo, and neon green, yellow, blue swim trunks with penny loafers, Bill's snapped hat, and glasses mostly broken and not set on his face. So I didn't care about that when I was younger. I didn't have any thoughts of embarrassment or anything like that. But when you're 12, 13, 14, you start to develop crushes. And I had a crush on a girl named Joanna Mesereau. She was my #1 crush. And one day, sorry guys, one day I decided I was gonna go up to Joanna, I was gonna talk to her. And my dad, at that time actually, I had planned this out. I knew my mom was gonna pick me up that day, so I was safe. I was gonna talk to Joanna. Her parents were there. I was gonna try to ask her out. This was gonna be my first date. So I went up to Joanna, and her parents were there. Started talking. I knew my mom was coming to pick me up, so it was gonna be safe. It was gonna be okay. But I start listening, and I hear this sound, and it's the sound of which means my dad is turning the corner in his 1999 Acura with half a working muffler, because us Segals, we don't repair. We just replace if we can. So here he came, and I am bracing myself, wondering what is going to walk out that Acura. And here he comes. I get the purple polo. I get bright yellow neon swim trunks and penny loafers. And here he comes, shuffling over. And then he starts talking. And within 2 seconds, her parents are laughing. She's smiling. And he's able to land me my first date.
Woo!
we're going to the Bucks game tomorrow night. And he picks us up, and he's wearing khakis, and he's wearing a dress shirt. And the next day at school, it's confirmed I have the cool dad. Woo! Slightly weird, but cool. Joanna comes up to me and says, "Your dad's he's weird, but he's really cool."
Yeah.
So the way that I've been thinking about it is, for everyone that had ever judged a book by its cover, they missed out on one of the funniest, most caring, enduring friends that I have ever known. And thank you everyone who has sent in audio, sent in clips of him. I have been going through countless minutes, hours of his sound checks, of his spots, and I was always envious of everyone that got to know him in his 20s and 30s. I got 45 and on, and I can't tell you guys, after listening to all of that, I got crumbs, I got a taste. I want to pick up the phone so bad to just say, "Why didn't you tell me that you were a fucking rock star?"
Yeah.
Have a lot of questions, but I'm hoping I can hear some stories tonight. I'm hoping I can learn a little bit more. I dealt with the shenanigans of 45 and on. I can't imagine what you guys experienced from 20 and 30. Thank you guys for being here.
Good job, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now you know why we're here. We're here because, when the moment came after this whole life, we thought we had 6 months, and we thought that we were going to jump on planes and get there and go be there with our guy, and we didn't have it. We had 6 days, but when Alex called me the second it happened, I said, "I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions. Question one is, do you want this now or later?" And he said later. So later's a little bit easier tonight. And then I said, "Do you want Milwaukee or do you want it elsewhere?" And he said elsewhere. And had to be here. Had to be here. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Don Law. This is hallowed ground that we're in. This is an amazing thing. I don't know how to introduce myself. I'm Rob Barnett. I'm Stephen's other son. I'm his brother. He was my mentor. He was my teacher. He was everything to our best friends who are here tonight. Rock and roll changed every single one of us in this room. It helped define who we are. It helped us know how we felt, who we chose to love, and how we lived. And so that spirit led me to meet Stephen here in Boston in the late 70s, and he immediately became the greatest influence on my life. After my Boston years at BCN, COZ, and AAF, somebody gave me the stupid idea to go to Dallas, fucking Texas, and run a rock station. So my first thought was, well, I'm bringing Stephen. So Stephen came down and did mornings. That's where he met Wendy. They fell in love, and that's how we all met Alex. I promise to keep this really short because we want to share this mic as much as we can tonight. So I just want to say that Stephen's wild ride of a life honored these words: freedom, individuality, fearlessness like I've never seen before, fun, loyalty, democracy, and rock and roll. I miss him so much. I miss the constant long phone calls that many of you were all on, where he talked and we listened for hours, and then we usually said, "Stephen, I gotta go." But I asked him what he would say tonight. What would he say? And it came through as pure and simple, as profound as it could be. Stephen would want us all to love each other and take care of each other with all the time we have left, to do good work and to keep laughing. Thank you so much. Sam Kopper is one of the people that made this night possible. The mic is yours, my friend.
Oh no, Sam.
Stephen was born on April 11th. I was born April 9th. Every year, we would be calling one another, and to say that I missed the call this year is a massive understatement. By the way, I was 2 days older than he, and expected deference, forget about it. I remember in May of '68, late in the month, I came to WBCN and managed to get on the air. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, I remember it as mid-June, but somebody else said it's like it was July, was when Stephen came. Now, Ray had pulled together the most amazing group of young, creative people with a vision that was, you know, our own here. We had a totally credible Northeast-based, underground, progressive, revolutionary radio station going. We had a Northeast feel. It was valid. It was good as it was. But when Stephen came across the country, I have always kind of imagined it as this pod, this fertilization that came in. And he brought in this West Coast vibe, the whole Tom Donahue tradition, and of course his own utterly unique, people use that word too much, unique is one, rare is many, but utterly unique Stephen Segal came in, and it was Stephen's input. He was very much our guru in those first few years. It was his contribution to what was already going on at BCN that, quite frankly, was the best of the station for all the decades it ever lived. It existed right up to 2009. It changed tremendously, of course, in the last decade or so. But the basic spirit of fuck them if they can't take a joke was always there. So that's the positive. And then, about that time when I first got to BCN, Ray was paying us as well as he could, I think. I totally believe that. But we were hard up for dough. And I just remember this night at Lesley Palmiter's apartment when Stephen had come up with a great idea to augment our income. A pound of pot was shipped in. And Lesley and Stephen and I were on the kitchen floor there bagging it. And we did augment our income at that point. In the last few years, as mentioned, of course, many of us have spoken, many times with Stephen, and they're always long calls, and I tried to schedule them for a time of day I'd still be awake. But those calls, the man was still effervescing, totally effervescing ideas, creative ideas, new projects. They were coming from his unique mind all the way to the end. And I was speaking with him last fall, and he had a rough few weeks, and he wasn't sounding that great on the phone, though he'd been sounding great during the middle of the summer. And, we're talking, and he sounding a little subdued, and just suddenly he said, and this was very rare, he said, "I gotta go. My stomach's killing me." And I just, then those 6 days happened. And wow. Now listen, those are my thoughts. Another one of our dear friends at KPPC, David Pierce, could not be here. He's a Gulf Coast, Louisiana guy. And so we've got a couple of minutes of David Pierce's thoughts. And I thank you very much. I thank Don, I thank Alex and Lisa, and I thank everybody for being here. And most of all, I thank Stephen Segal, Stephen the Seagull. I love you. Here's David Pierce.
God bless you. Dave Pierce here from South Louisiana Cajun country. When Steve Segal came back to Los Angeles in the spring of 1970, he moved quickly to put together the KPPC team that ran for the Roses in the next 18 months. He convinced Les Carter and me that it could be done. All you need was more power, taller tower, and an outrageous radio staff. He talked Mississippian Sam to bring some of that BCN success to Pasadena. Expanded my radio show, becoming the Pierce family with little kids' voices between rock records and anti-government slogans. Stephen Clean, of course, was a master at putting sets together, and he was one of the great radio rappers, unrestricted, doing his best work, leading us from the basement of the church to the top of the town. And he took on friends for life. We lived in a duplex out in North Hollywood. He would come into my apartment waving vinyl with a, "Hey man, you gotta hear this." He'd put it on my stereo, turn it up real loud, and then he'd walk out. To my 7-year-old son, John David, the obscene Stephen Clean was cooler than Batman. Out at KPPC in the afternoons, they played basketball in the vacant lot where we staged the pie fight with Elton John on his first stop on the way to the Troubadour. I documented all of it, fortunately. Got Writing on the Ether Express published. Back there somewhere in a smoky haze, Stephen had given me the subtitle, The 60s, from a front row seat. That's what we were all about. I narrated it up on Audible with some great audio from Kopper's Treasure Chest. Added bonus Laquidara's early years in Hollywood before he met Stephen, Joe, Sam, Al, and many of you in the BCN family. There's some great stories about underground radio, none better than the Boston-Los Angeles connection that Stephen set in motion. We reconnected a couple of years ago, good for both of us. The hour-long rants dissing the bad guys, him telling his stories of the great times he had with son Alex growing up. And he laid out a plan to voice again. I believed him. I'll be listening for all of you and your personal stories of our friend that we were privileged to know and to have shared in his work. A big bon chance to all of you.
Joe Rogers. Joe?
Hello, good evening. I'm Joe Rogers. On the radio, I was Mississippi in different years.
We can't hear you.
Oh,
Cannot hear you. You're in radio.
closer. My name is Joe Rogers. I was Mississippi on the radio at different radio stations. 3 times with Stephen in different stations, as well as 2 times we were roommates for twice. So I got over the course of the years, I got to know Stephen. I think I could say I got to know him very well. I'm going to begin by telling a story that Stephen told me 50 years ago about his early childhood. Growing up in Buffalo with his brother and sister and his parents, Stephen told me that when he was young, his parents were concerned that he was very slow, that he wasn't learning along with his peers, and they were worried. They felt that there was something must be wrong. Until the day that his father took him to a baseball game, and at that baseball game, a ball was hit over to where they were, and everybody ducked, except for Stephen. And his father turned and looked at him and said, "Why didn't you duck? Didn't you see that ball?" And Stephen said, "What ball?" Stephen said, "What ball?" And then there was a hallelujah moment. His father turned to him and said, "Wait a minute. You're not retarded. You're just blind." And they celebrated all the way home. They went to the optometrist the next day and they discovered that Stephen was one sharp cookie.
With thick glasses.
Yes, with thick glasses. Fast forward to 1968, and they're in the beginning of WCN. I was there for that, and I was learning how to be a disc jockey. And I felt the heavy responsibility of doing that at a government-authorized, FCC-regulated facility. So I took it all pretty seriously. I wanted to be responsible and do due diligence, and so in my portion of the day when I was on the air, I would play records, and then see. I didn't like the part where I had to open the microphone and announce stuff. I liked playing the records because it was just wonderful to be sending out this music that people had not been able to hear. These records existed, but no one could hear them until there was a radio station that could broadcast them. And I was just the luckiest person in the world to have shown up at the right time to be able to do that. So that was wonderful. A dream come true. I didn't like the announcing because there was a real work to that, and I was trying to be responsible about playing the records and then announce what those records were and try to sound knowledgeable along the way. So that was the restricted format that I had upon myself because I was trying to be responsible doing this. And then that summer, Steven Segal showed up at the radio station. And things got different pretty quickly. When he arrived, he was he was a fresh, breezy West Coast, his West Coast musical taste, and he brought with him a huge imagination. And we found that when Stephen opened the microphone, he was inviting you into his world of thoughts. When he opened the microphone, he was taking you into the land of the merry pranksters. The land of his merry pranksters that he carried in his head. When Stephen opened the microphone, it immediately became Anything Can Happen Day. The Mickey Mouse Club had once a week had Anything Can Happen Day. When Stephen opened the microphone, it was Anything Can Happen Day. And you know that if you listen to him, you know that when he began reading a scripted commercial, you wouldn't walk away. You wouldn't walk away. You would want to hear it because you never know where it was going to go. You didn't know what would trigger him, and it would send it off. And there we would be saying, I wonder where he's going with this. So it was wonderful, and it was just recklessly making things up. It was adventurous and it was fun. And me, the serious one the serious one, being near him had to affect me and infect me, and I ended up feeling that, gradually, I took the same deep satisfaction into playing the music out there for the people, but I found that playing music for the people plus something, maybe just making stuff up, making stuff up for the fun of it, could make it just a little bit better. I wanted to tell one story. I do have a favorite story of one of the things that Stephen did. It wasn't the biggest thing he did. There were an awful lot of things that he did. But when he was out in Los Angeles at KMET, he met some people who wanted to get married. And their conversation was about getting a justice of the peace and how do you do that and what does it cost and like that. And Stephen said, well, wait a minute, let's get everybody married. Let's have all of the KMET listeners who want to get married, we will get them all married. And he went to the station and he made the arrangements for them to hire a justice of the peace. And Stephen came back and announced, if you're a KMET listener and you want to get married, come down to the station on this Sunday, and you can be married for free at the La Brea Tar Pits. And it was at the La Brea Tar Pits, and I just loved that. I love that. And I know that if my wife and I someday we decide to renew our vows, we will fly to Los Angeles, we'll go to the La Brea Tar Pits, put down some flowers and say, Stephen, thank you. A good friend of Stephen in the West Coast years was Shadow Stephen. Shadow Stevens, who began at WRKO here in Boston and went west and became huge. And he has some remembrances of, I should mention that he has this wonderful thing that he put together called Mental Radio, which is available to you, and you really should hear it. It's remarkable production. But for tonight, he sent in this for Stephen.
On this solemn occasion, let us reflect on the wonder and glory of a man among men, a one-of-a-kind original, who gleefully glided over the airwaves with rambling, mad, satirical asides and commentary, improvising, contriving, throwing together off-the-cuff, impulsive whims and ad-libs that kept listeners on their feet.
And now, Stephen Clean. And now, Stephen Clean.
What? Gives me White Tonka on air. KMET 94.7 in Los Angeles, the wonderful Tubes. For a while up in San Francisco, and this part is true, they were known as the Beans. Now, that's really ridiculous, being from San Francisco. And no one even from Boston has had the consummate bad taste and concurrent guts to name their group the Beans. Mondo Bondage is on this album. And of course, White Punks on Dope. What a treasure. Stephen Clean with you until 7 o'clock this evening. The absolutely, constantly regeneratively amazing Mary Turner from 7 until midnight.
He was the genuine article, a pioneer in sometimes caustic banter, attitude, and satire.
It reminds me of the fantasy I had that making a movie about the McGovern-Nixon election, in which the once President Nixon was, well, run over by a car and dismembered during the election, and despite the fact that he was among the deceased, decided that he had such a long lead over McGovern that he'd just stay in the race. News to prop him up for the night before the election. An hour with the president. Alderman and Alderman would keep coming out from side stage and propping him back up in his chair. Do you realize how close that was to what actually happened?
Hi, we're the Commodores, and we like to say you're listening to Stephen Clean on KMET 94.7 Los Angeles.
Received another threat on my life the other day, by the way, for playing I'll Be There by the Jackson 5. That makes a total of somewhere in the vicinity of between 25 and 30 actual threats for playing Jackson 5 material from the pre-disco and post-to-go-go days.
It was like listening to the National Lampoon. For those who remember, the National Lampoon.
God, it gets so hard to tell satire from the real thing these days. It's really starting to get difficult to be a satirically oriented disc jockey. You know what I mean?
And at this moment, somewhere in the heavens, the gods are hearing the stories from the obscene Stephen Clean.
promise you, Alex had an amazing idea. If before you leave, you can make sure that everybody's got your email address, because we want everyone to have all of this. As further proof that every moment here tonight would make this man happy beyond belief, please welcome Charles Laquidara.
I didn't know him as Stephen Kleen. I knew him as Steve Segal, the Segal. All of us here. BCN was, I was at BCN for like, I think 25 years. And it was divided into a whole bunch of eras. And the era that I think was the golden era of WBCN, without any doubt. In fact, Bill Lichtenstein did a movie about it. Was the years with Steven Segal. And when I first came to Boston in late '68, Steven was already the superstar. We would sit around. I remember Joe Rogers and Sam and I. We'd all be just sitting around, maybe getting stoned a little bit, and we'd be listening to him. The Crosby, Stills, Nash album had just come out, and he just kept. This is a time when in radio you could do anything, and Steven did anything. It was like the album came out, and he decided he liked Sweet for Judy Blue Eyes, so he just kept playing it and playing it and playing it over and over. And I think at one point we had a contest as to who could tell which was going to be the last you know, that ending. It's going to be that. No, it's not that. You know, we would sort of have a guessing game as to when that thing would end. But Steven was, in my opinion, the greatest disc jockey I ever heard. Better than Howard Stern, better than anyone we know. He was the greatest disc jockey. His brain, his mind, it was crazy. When we were working together, so I think Sam was the PD. He asked us all to make promos about our own shows. You know, you guys do something, tell everybody who you are, what you do. You know, and I did one. I'm Charles Laquidara, whatever. I'm the new guy from California. But the next day after I did that, you know, you put it on those 8-tracks, those carts, they called them, carts you put in. And I made this really great promo for myself. The next day I came to work, and the cart was gone. I mean, I didn't see it. It was gone. And there was a cart there that had my name on it. And I put the cart in, and it was a promo about me from Steven Segal, and it was the best thing. I mean, I could never have done as good about it. It was fantastic. I felt, oh, I'm a superstar. But I peeled back that label a couple of days later, and he had taken the thing I did, and he just went over it. He decided it wasn't good enough. He just did it over. So, it was like, we went to visit him. I remember when he got the job in LA, we were visiting LA. Let's go see Steven Segal. And so we drove into this parking lot. I wasn't sure whether it was the right place, but as we were walking, remember how records came in acetate in packages in brown boxes, like little record? There was all these empty boxes going right up to the door. That was, and we knew. I reached down, got a box, and it was to Steven Segal. You know, this guy just, you know, he would open up an album, you know, a box and throw it on the ground, and you just, so we knew that he was working there. I just told Alex the whole story. There were just so many different stories, but to sit around and just listen to him, I mean, that was radio at its best, and I don't think it'll ever be done again. Of course, that kind of radio, this was underground radio. This was when Tom Donahue, in fact, Joe, when wasn't Steve part of all that with Donahue and
Yes, and Donahue recommended Stephen to come to Boston.
He was the one that recommended Steve come to Boston.
Well, recommended it, yes. Yeah. But to Ray.
Yeah. Anyway, we were all part of it. All the people in this room, we were part of what radio really was like. We were part of the golden days of radio, and Stephen Kleen was our leader, our guard. He was the best at it, so thank you.
I just want to say that, you know, over all the years, program directors often tried to get disc jockeys to not talk so long. Long before NPR came up with that driveway moment phrase, Stephen was creating those driveway moments. He could talk for 5 minutes or more, and you'd be on the edge of your seat every second.
Didn't he do something about a cat in a microwave?
Paul Rappaport, ladies and gentlemen. Paul did something amazing. One of the things that really inspired Alex is that the second that we got the news that Stephen passed, at least one of his, how many Facebook profiles, Alex? Was that 4 or 5? We all started to find out about this, and Paul wrote something that we'll make sure everybody gets a chance to read. My friend, Paul.
Tall Paul. Yeah. Anyway, for those of you who don't know me, I worked for Columbia Records for 30 plus years, and I started in California, and that's where I met Stephen. And I used to listen to Stephen on KPPC when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. And this guy, Mississippi, who I met for the first time last night, gushed on him because, you know, it was my disc jockey idol. I was like, the guy was playing the greatest records in the world. And when I started working for Columbia, I was local Los Angeles, and I met Stephen at KMET. And we hit it off immediately, and we became really close friends. And I'll try to be brief, but you have to hear this stuff because you cannot make this shit up. So just on a personal note, he used to come to my house. I had an apartment in Hollywood in the base of Laurel Canyon, and I had this hockey game, the ones with the little, you know, rods and the twisters and all this kind of stuff. And he would come over, and he and I would get drunk and stoned, and for hours play this hockey game. And he was really good at it, which pissed me off. So I was really good at it too, and it was like watching two Chinese ping pong guys like shoving stuff and twisting twisters and the hockey puck flying across. It was just, you know, two big kids posing as adults. And but he, I would just say this: I've been in the music business my whole life, and we throw around the term genius a lot. And I would just like to say, I've only met 2 in my life. One's Bob Dylan, and the other one's Stephen Kleen. Wow. One day I called him, he was on KMET, I said, look, we got a record with Nicky Hopkins. Usually when I bring people to radio stations, that was an acoustic guitar, because that's all we could do. I said, Stephen, what if I could get a full-size, you know, stand-up piano in the KMET studios, which was very small, you know, upright. And he didn't know if he could even fit in the elevator, because it was a joke that the KMET studios elevator was like this big. So I take all the measurements, and sure as shit, it fits. And these guys can barely get this piano in, and we get this giant upright piano at KMET, and Nicky comes, and he's telling Rolling Stones stories. He was playing for the Stones then, and he's playing his own stuff and all that. Stephen says, hey, look, do you have anything else to do this afternoon? I said, well, you know, we could see Nicky Hopkins. I got stuff. He goes, can you stay here the whole show? I said, I'll make some calls. I said, what do you have in mind? He had Nicky play the ins and the outs to all the commercials like Doc Severinsen was doing. Wow. Carson. And it was like, hey, we'll be right back into this. Take us out, Nicky. And here's Nicky Hopkins from the Rolling Stones. The whole show. And Nicky Hopkins, all of a sudden, this Rolling Stones guy is not part of Stephen's, you know, brain trust of what he does. And it was on and on. He was a big UCLA basketball fan, and UCLA won a championship one night, and it was a big deal because they didn't have all the superstars they'd had the year before. But he was such a fan, he called one of the players. He goes, look, why don't you come down here and celebrate? That's the greatest game I've ever seen in my life. The guy says, oh my God, you're my favorite disc jockey. Are you kidding me? He says, no. He says, okay, can I bring some of the guys? He goes, yeah. So all of a sudden you got 3 or 4 of UCLA's star basketball team in the studio with Steven. And one of the guys was Marquise Johnson, who was famous for his dribbling. So Steven tells him, whenever I open the mic, I want you to dribble. Okay. And it sounds like beat poetry. Like Steven's like talking, and then they go, bah, 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 bah. And then there's a lot of doom, doom, bah, 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 bah. And then Steven talks. And it was like this, the most outrageous thing. Okay, so Don Henley's listening from the Eagles. You have to, I'll tell you, you have to understand how popular Steven was in Los Angeles. So Don Henley calls up and goes, Steven, this is great, this sounds great. Can I come down with some of the guys? He goes, yeah, sure. So all the Eagles show up. So now Steven's got the UCLA star basketball team and the Eagles. You know, he told me it was the greatest show he ever did in his life. And everybody's playing records and jumping all over each other. But it was like the whole city listened to this guy. You have to understand, kids would jump out of school early so they could tune him in so they didn't want to miss anything. They would trade cassettes of him. His rival across the street, who was Richard Kimball, working for KWIS at the time, his girlfriend listened to Steven. My friend Jim McKean, who was a program director, went to get his haircut from her. She was a hairstylist, and he walks in and he goes, don't you listen to Richard? And she goes, yeah, Richard's all right, but you just gotta listen to Steven. And this is how it was. So, you know, it was on and on and on and on, but he was just this superstar in Los Angeles. And just a couple more things. As a lot of us know, as a lot of geniuses are, they can do the genius stuff very easy, but they don't do the everyday stuff so well. So I get a call, I'm in the music library at KMET, and Kathy Kenyon's in there, music director. She goes, hey, Steven just called, he's gonna be late for his shift, he ran out of gas, can you go get him? I said, sure. I go down Cahuenga Boulevard, Steven has run out of gas, not more than 15 yards away from not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5 fucking gas stations. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You could just push the car at 15 yards, you can get gas. I mean, they're right there. And all he could say was, oh, Rap, you know how I am. But Steven, and I didn't realize this was a Segal thing, I thought it was a clean thing. He never took cars in to be checked. He would just drive them till they stopped, and then he'd leave them wherever they stopped, and he'd get a new one. And he'd either buy one or KMET would buy him one. And, you know, I guess there were various cars in Los Angeles, you know, laying around. Because this is, you know, this is how he was. So I'll just leave you with this last one. So I've got stories for like ever. I went to visit him one day in his apartment. And so like he was with cars, that's how he was with appliances. So he had TV sets. And when they broke, he didn't throw them out. So I walk into his apartment, there's 3 TV sets. There's a stack of them. There's 2 broken ones, one here, and then the working model is on the top. On the top TV, there is a marionette of a famous evangelist at the time, Catherine Kuhlman. Now, I have no idea who the hell would make a marionette of Catherine Kuhlman. I have no idea why anybody would want a fucking marionette of Catherine Kuhlman, but Steven had to have it. And there she was. And so it was just hysterical. It was a mountain of TVs with Catherine Kuhlman sitting on the top. So later, in this last couple of years, I got to talk to him as well, because I was writing the book and I wanted to make sure I got him in there. And I said, I don't understand the Catherine Kuhlman thing. And he said, he said, at the time, I was very enamored with these people and the control they had over so many people. And so I kept her around as a mascot, you know, for me. And I said, okay, well, that's all, you know, well and good. But there's a lot of people who are going to come up and speak, so I'm going to get out of here. But just one last thing, I told this to Alex, but I would like to tell it to everybody. Every time I talked to him in the last 2 years, all he could talk to me was about Alex. He was so proud of Alex and what Alex had done and what Alex had accomplished and the fact that Alex was taking care of him. And so, you know, So, yeah, he was probably a weird dad, but he was also probably a fucking great one. So, thank you.
Bring up Lesley Palmiter. PA for you anytime.
Hey there. Oh, Stephen. He would love the fact that you are all here and that you all loved him so very much. He'd be so tickled. A few memories. I met Stephen in '68. It was just after he started at BCN. Sam brought him over to my place for dinner, and through gales of laughter and getting to know each other through, what you said, what was that? Bagging pot on the floor? Not true, I bathed in it.
Before we bagged it.
Stephen was complicated, we all know that, and whip smart. Nothing got past Stephen. His intellect was fierce, and his on-air takedowns of injustice and corruption expertly delivered. He could be moody, but he was always fiercely, fiercely loyal to his friends. In late '78, I was ecstatic to learn that COZ had hired Stephen to ply his brilliance on our signal. As with everyone who ever worked with Stephen, I was humbled to be in his orbit. As his friend, I loved his great heart and rapier wit, whose barbs were known to harpoon unexpected targets at the most unpredictable times. Ever the clean machine, Stephen was the last person interested in his appearance. Ever his friend, I offered some help. So I offered to give him regular haircuts. Didn't take much persuasion. So after mandatory washing in the men's room, he met with towel, conditioner, scissors, all in my cubicle in the COZ back office. Boy, did he eat that up. A true egalitarian, Stephen was most interested in people and the world around him. Character and doing the right thing was everything. Of course, music, humor and banter, and all that facilitated. Stephen felt deeply about everything, and he was overjoyed when his son Alex came into the world. By the way, Alex, I met you as a toddler. Yep, we met before tonight. I'll never forget Stephen's laugh. We laughed until we cried, and that was often back then. And right up until a few weeks the last time before he died. Even when sick, Stephen was always eager for the next thing, his exciting new projects, especially after talking with Norm or Tommy. And Alex. Most of all, Stephen was the proudest of you, son.
Very true.
Thanks.
And as if by perfection, Lesley has mentioned our next two speakers. We got a couple more, Tommy and then Norm. Tommy Hadges.
Okay, I hope I get through this.
Closer.
Okay. Hello. So, my relationship with Stephen was sort of in two parts. The first part was at WBCN, but it was kind of incidental because although I was part of the full-time air staff when BCN went full-time, you know, that was during the summer months, and I was still at college. So when September came, I was like, hey, I got to go back to school. I got to get my degree. I didn't even think about staying at BCN. Interesting where our minds were in these days. Wanted to get my degree, so Stephen arrived after I left, and I would listen to him and I was still working part-time. I would see him occasionally. But the inspiration that he gave was in, as people have already mentioned, his shows. Because we were playing good music, and we did great back sells, but we didn't really get into the idea of telling stories with our music sets. And in my mind, that's what Stephen brought, and that's how he changed the BCN sound. It certainly affected the way I was doing my shows, for sure, and I think it affected the station in general. But my much closer and better remembrances with Stephen were when I was at COZ. I had become the program director at COZ in 1978, so I wanted to do what I could to really, get something importantly good on the radio station, a real magnet for the station, and so I immediately thought of Clean. He wasn't on the air. And so I was a little reluctant to hire him because he was, as has been made perfectly clear here tonight, and you all know him and knew him, he was the ultimate hippie, not a mainstream person. And WCOZ was the sister station of an AM, WHDH AM, 50,000 watt powerhouse. Jess Kane was the morning man. It couldn't have been more mainstream if you could have imagined. So I was worried what the culture, what the room would be like. I knew the audience would like him through the speakers, but what was it going to be like in the building? The lucky part was that Dave Kroninger, who was the general manager of both stations, he also had a Metro Media background, by the way. He had an interesting way of building staffs, and that was that every day at 5 o'clock in the conference room, all the drinks were free. It was an open bar for anybody on either air staff. So you had sportscasters, news people, traffic people, office people, janitors, whoever wanted to come in could sit down and have free booze. And it was a long time ago. Nobody really worried about DUIs in those days. Okay, they didn't worry about how they were going to get them home, but it was a great way to get people working. Now, I hired Stephen to do afternoon drive, so he was on from 2 to 6. Maybe some of you are already doing the math here. Okay, so at 5 o'clock, the bar opens. Everybody's up there for about an hour. They get very well lubricated. Everybody's happy. And Stephen arrives. And the amazing thing is to see how quickly and how easily he just became, everyone loved him from the first moment. The MDC traffic guy who was an MDC police person. Officer Bill, thank you. I can't remember his name, but it was Officer Bill. I'm sure that Officer Bill more than once gave him a ride back to his home at the YMCA in an MDC car. I'm sure that happened. But that's the genius of this guy. I mean, he was able to, someone used the word chameleon, I forget who it was. On the air, he could do it because of the way that he was so quick, so intelligent, so funny, so caustic, so whimsical. You couldn't help but love him. We all did.
It's great to see everybody, and to tell you the truth, this is the last place I wanted to be now, or whenever it was going to happen. I first became aware of Stephen when I was a kid in college at Brandeis University in Waltham, the Precision City, and WBCN came on there, March 1968, and I'd never heard anything like it except college radio. Right? It came out of college radio. So many of us in this room and people elsewhere, until they discontinued those programs, played music for the first time, talked to strangers for the first time on college radio. And so what they borrowed was some of the best air talent from the local, non-commercial stations, college stations, and in comes Stephen. And then, Mississippi started off the station, as you heard before, Frank Zappa, and with Tommy Hadges. everybody came from other places. Sam Kopper from the august Syracuse University, great broadcasting school, and on. But some people off the street, like J.J. Jackson and other people. I'm not going to mention the name. That's not the point. The fact is that into all of this group of somewhat random personalities, and I don't mean the term in a radio sense, you've got Stephen Kleen from another planet. His parents put him in a rocket when the planet was about to explode, and he came here and he brought us words. He brought us more words than we'd ever heard a person who plays music on the radio ever use. And there were some words we didn't know, and they didn't do that on radio. You know, a level of intelligence, of remarkable humor, adroit, and I didn't write anything down because I'm going to use as few adjectives as possible, despite what my father taught me, which is, why use one adjective when you could use 7 just as well? You know how I talk. I'm trying to keep it moving. Wait, is there anybody after me? How late do we have this room? Oh, okay, good.
They can snap.
The point is, I'll come to the point. I've never heard anything in my life like Stephen. And whatever the rest of the radio station was like, because, I was on the radio 4 nights a week at my college station at the point, and I was trying to evaluate them. I wanted to critique them. I wanted to dismiss them. But Stephen raised that medium, that entire fucking medium of radio, to a whole nother level. And it's hard to put that into words. And in fact, I talked about Stephen being the greatest user of words of anyone I think I've ever heard on the radio. But the thing is that, Joe Rogers, by contrast, for example, Joe uses the most efficient use of words we've ever heard on the radio. But what Stephen was able to do is take things to another level, to another platform, as I was saying. And when I think of the brilliance, the devastatingly consistent unpredictability, the charm that he had, the insights that just stop on a dime, going off on a tangent, making it work, and figuring out a way to somehow circuitously come back to the beginning. His mind worked like no one's mind I've ever heard of. And the people who knew him, most of all, the people who get to hear him on the radio, and even the people in the generations, hopefully, that will hear more of Stevens as we go through all the cartons in our garages and respective basements and storage areas. I'm not speaking about anyone personally, but I'm sorry, I'll keep digging, I promise I will. It's hard to talk. You guys used up all the words, by the way. You guys told some of the stories I was going to tell. You did it so masterfully. Everyone's conveying their emotions really reminded me how sad I've been. And I know we all are, because we miss Stephen. We're going to miss him.